Mr. Chidambaram, let's talk about a very crucial point that has become the focus of discussion in Parliament and outside. The Prime Minister's open backing of the private sector, where he says you certainly can't expect the country to be run by babus. And then a day later, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi coining a new term for this government, hum do hamare do, which means two people in the government and benefiting two top industrialists. Now, do you think that in this day and age, criticizing the private sector for political gain could reap political dividends, or is this an exercise which is good or in the interest of the country?
We are not criticizing the private sector. In fact, it is the Congress party in 1991 which opened the doors for the private sector into banking, into insurance, into ports, into airports, into infrastructure like roads. It was the Congress party which expanded the space for the private sector. I think memories are short, but just go back to pre-1991 and post-1991 up to 2013-14. The Congress party, whether as a single party government or in coalition, opened the space, enlarged the space for the private sector. Our point is slightly different. Our point is, if you want to enlarge the space for the private sector, say in banking, give one more license, give two more licenses to whoever is fit and proper to start a bank. If you want to enlarge the space for the private sector in insurance, give more licenses. There are already some 21 or 22 private life insurers and private general insurers. Let that number be increased to 22, 23, 24. All that we are asking is, why hand over a ready-made bank with a lineage of about 100, 120 years to a private sector big business house? That question has never been answered. We had a very coherent policy in privatization. It has three limbs. First, privatize all chronically loss-making public sector units. Two, privatize a public sector unit which has a very small market share and a small contribution to the market, for example, Cement Corporation. Three, privatize a public sector which has fallen way behind on technology, for example, Hindustan Photo Films. These three must be privatized. But why privatize a company or a business which is competitive, which is technologically abreast of technology in the world, and which is profit-making? Why privatize that?
Okay. Now, the government's explanation, I'm sure you must have heard the Prime Minister saying that we have to create a situation where reforms are acceptable. Everybody agrees that reforms are required. So if through the course of reform, certain changes are made, then it must be acceptable. It should be accepted. And going forward, if any change is required, go ahead and implement it.
Why is the Prime Minister reading this primer to us? We were the ones who said change is necessary. Continuity with change, or change with continuity, was the mantra of the UPA governments under Dr. Manmohan Singh. We said we must change, but the change must be acceptable to the people. People must be willing to accept the pace of change. So why is the Prime Minister reading our lessons back to us? What have we done?
Yeah.
What have we done which opposes change which is acceptable to the people?
Sure. Mr. Chidambaram, do you fear that in the world of perception, yes, the farmers understand and they've been saying the same, the point that Rahul Gandhi also made, but the BJP feels that there is a large section which feels that the Congress party is trying to demonize the private sector, and that is not going to work. The Prime Minister said it may have worked politically at some point, it's not going to work now. Do you fear that in the world of perception, the Congress will be seen as a party which is anti-private?
Not at all. We are pointing out to crony capitalism. We are not pointing a finger at legitimate private sector which competes with each other. Have we said a word against the software company, the information technology companies? Have we said a word against any other company in the retail sector, consumer goods? We have not said a word against them. All that we are pointing out is your recent history points to crony capitalism. Therefore, we are duty-bound to point to the dangers of crony capitalism, number one. Number two, we are duty-bound to point to the dangers of monopolization. Are you supporting monopolies? Go through the history of the US. How many monopolies were broken down? And today China is becoming alive to the dangers of a monopoly organization. We are against crony capitalism. We are against monopolies. We support the private sector. In fact, we were the first to support the private sector when we opened up more and more space for the private sector in a large number of fields. Go back and read the BJP speeches. Remember in 1996-97, when I introduced the first insurance bill and allowed for 20% FDI, it was defeated on the floor of the Lok Sabha by the BJP voting against that clause. And Prime Minister Gujarat had to withdraw that bill. 20% FDI they voted against. And today they're announcing 74% FDI. I see the irony of it.
All right. Mr. P Chidambaram, thank you very much for joining us right here on NDTV.
Thank you.